In this lecture, I'm going to provide an overview of Africana, African American, and Black studies and the critical contribution that Black studies has made to the field of ethnic studies and some of the foundational perspectives and influences of Africana, African American, and Black studies. So, some of the learning objectives of this lecture is to provide an overview of some of the concepts used in the field of African American and Black studies. We're going to talk a bit about Pan-Africanism, the Black Power, anti-Black racism, Black nationalism, anti-Black discrimination, double consciousness, so the work of W.E.B. Du Bois, and kind of anti-Blackness in controlling images. We're also going to apply theory and knowledge produced by Black communities to describe, society, critical events and histories and cultures, and some of the Black radical tradition. We're also going to critically analyze the intersection of race and racism as it relate to class in the economy and work, gender and sexuality, religion, spirituality in Black communities, and explain and assess how Black struggle and Black resistance has been played a foundational role in anti-racist movements for justice and solidarity and liberation in the United States, and how Black communities are relevant to current and structural issues such as communal, national, international, and transnational politics. And finally, briefly, I'll talk a bit about kind of Black-led anti-racist practices that can build a more just and equitable society. And so, Black studies and African American studies provides a comprehensive and interdisciplinary home for the intellectual work being done by Black scholars to uncover and analyze and document and explain the complex and varied experiences of people of African descent, of African origin. And so, while Africana and Black studies refer broadly to experiences of people with an African heritage throughout the world, African American studies are explicitly focuses on Black people in the United States who were enslaved in the United States and kind of post-slavery. Also Black-led resistance to racism. And so you're going to read a bit in the chapter about Black power and Black studies. And so two key political frameworks that are important for us in this class to understand is the work of Marcus Garvey, so Garveyism, and Black studies, so Black power and Black nationalism. So Black power is a movement and political belief system that emphasizes building Black-serving institutions and leaders, Black autonomy, and how Black people can lead themselves for a liberatory society. Black nationalism is a bit different. Black nationalism is an ideology emphasizing Black pride, Black economic self-sufficiency, and in some cases Black separatism. But one of the probably actually the most influential scholar, at least for the work I do. So I study racism in work, in the economy. The most influential person in my field has always been W.E.B. Du Bois. W.E.B. Du Bois was the first African American to get a PhD at Harvard, and Du Bois is critical, had so many critical contributions. But what you're going to learn about is how we got here and this idea of the veil. And so W.E.B. Du Bois had a concept called double consciousness that symbolizes the psychological impact of living in a white dominant racist society for Black Americans in the years following the end of slavery. This double consciousness idea was that Black people had to exist both in the white dominated world and within their own Black spaces. That this double consciousness then came out of kind of having this kind of dual lives within a racist society. The societal treatment of African Americans, viewed by white society as a quote problem contributed to the development of what Du Bois talks about as the veil. And that's the lens through which African Americans viewed themselves from the perspective of white Americans. So despite being citizens in the United States, African Americans were denied the privileges of citizenship due to white supremacy and racism, and were not fully regarded as such. It's still a continuing plight for the contemporary Black communities and other Americans of color that they still experience. And so the foundational work of W.E.B. Du Bois plays a critical role in kind of the established field of critical Black scholarship. So you're also going to learn a bit about pre-colonial Africa in this chapter. That the African continent has been home to so many complex human societies for thousands and thousands of years, going back well over 10,000 years before white European contact with colonists and colonial outsiders. Multiple large empires and kingdoms were created by Black people, by African people, with systems of trade and taxation and political representation. And so that's a really foundational kind of histories, especially in Africana studies. We're also going to learn about how, in African American studies and slavery. So in response to the widespread, abduction and enslavement of African people, communities always resisted. Communities resisted this form of colonization and racism and white supremacy. Rebellions broke out, not only on slave ships and within the continent of Africa, but also on plantations in the United States. And there were even, rebellions broke out all across the Western Hemisphere. And at least 250 organized rebellions were conducted by slaves trying to liberate themselves and resisting, the racist conditions, exploitative conditions. And countless more, smaller scales, individual rebellions have been carried out. So part of, Black studies and African American studies is to, draw upon this legacy of Black resistance, right? Of Black liberation struggles, Black radical thought. And the system of slavery meant that not only were individuals enslaved, but their descendants inherited the system, right? Inherited that quality of being enslaved as well. So the economic conditions that a slave who had offspring or a child would then enrich the white slave master, slave owner, as an economic condition, really built those connections between how capitalism in the United States is infused with white supremacy and anti-Black racism. And that links up to the origins of slavery in the colonies and in the states that would become the United States. So to maintain large-scale slavery, a racialized ideology of dehumanization and anti-Blackness and exploitation was created. So the ideological system, so that's what we talk about with hegemony, right? So a belief system then was established by white slave owners that very much reproduced and normalized white dominance over Black people, and this extended even after slavery. We're also going to center abolitionist perspectives, and especially starting with the amazing work of Harriet Tubman, who was famous for her leadership in helping free enslaved people and bring them to safety through a network of the Underground Railroad, and then contemporary abolitionist struggles, whether that connects to Black Lives Matter, prison abolition, the calls for cops off campus led by students of color across community colleges and the CSU and the UC system. You're also going to learn a bit about the structural conditions of anti-Black racism, whether it's the era of Jim Crow. The Black Codes were laws that were created to restrict the movement and freedom of Black people post-slavery on Black people's abilities to own property, to conduct business, to lease land, and often movement across society. And these regulations work to keep separate and established kind of white dominance, white society from the lives of Black people. And so when racial identity became a legal category of inclusion and exclusion, this also meant that race had to be clearly defined. And so this goes into critical legal studies and critical race studies. It comes out of the kind of legal sphere. This idea of the one drop rule was applied to multiracial people, people of mixed race descent, meaning that if you even had one black ancestor, that by law, it made you legally and socially considered to be black. So think about the economic connections to then why would many southern states have this one drop rule category in their census during the times of slavery? That's what we should ask ourselves. And we see a clear incentive then for white slave owners to continue to grow and expand their legally defined property of people, black people, that any child of anyone who has any black ancestry would be by law defined as black. So that would then increase their labor of slaves. So thinking about the connections between economic oppression and anti-black racism is another key aspect of coming out of the social construction of race, right, which we talked about already. So you're going to learn a bit more about systemic racism, whether it's in the incarceration, in health disparities, in education, and also about liberation struggles. Black Lives Matter was very intentional about focusing on black lives as they are disregarded in white-dominated society, and this movement to really uphold black life is a huge intervention against kind of white supremacist thinking. And finally, thinking about the core theories presented in Black studies, whether that's Black power, Pan-Africanism, Black nationalism, the double consciousness, and how so many controlling images that are very much racist and anti-Black in the media, and how those images then can be internalized by people in a society is a really important thing to reflect upon this week as you delve into some of the contributions of Black scholars and Black activists, that Black studies is rooted in liberation struggles, that Black studies has led to the creation of theories and concepts that respond to and integrate the wisdom gained through intergenerational movements for social change. And so some of my own work, I've worked with, conducted a lot of oral histories with older generations of Black workers to, really uncover, not only the anti-Black racism they experience in the workplaces, but how they resist it, how they joined together with other Black workers and other communities of color to resist not only the racism of their bosses and the employers, but of their white peers, and how they built a more just workplace. Black studies is rooted in liberation struggles, and this has led to critical theories and concepts that we are going to read in this class. So starting, whether it's Du Bois or Tubman, or later the work of Patricia Hill Collins and Bell Hooks, the work of Marcus Garvey we're going to talk about. So all of this is part of the field of Black studies, of Pan-African or Africana studies, and African American studies. And so I hope you have a good week. This is a very exciting week, and there's so much to learn this week. So I hope you have a good one. If you have any questions, please get in touch with me on Canvas. Send me a Canvas message, and hope you have a good week.